the Einsatzgruppen went into the Soviet Union with a series of orders, plans drawn up, extensive plans drawn up for the economic and demographic and political remodeling of this whole area, specific orders which designated Jews, among others, as deliberate targets for extermination.
There was a prescribed method for carrying out mass shootings of Jews. Often pits were dug ahead of time, sometimes days in advance. Jews were marched to these usually isolated locations where they were either placed in the pits and shot there or shot into the pits. The whole process was so similar in different places at different times that it suggests a considerable degree of forethought and planning.
It is inconceivable that the Einsatzgruppen could have set out on their missions without preparation, briefing, organization, and agreement at the highest level. The Einsatzgruppen and the army were tasked with Führer orders, orders issued in the name of the Führer. They sent back reports to Himmler, routine weekly reports on the scale of the killing of Jews, commissars, and other groups that they targeted.
Irving claims the Einsatzgruppen massacres of up to 1.5 million victims were arbitrary actions by criminal individuals. To challenge Irving's claim, the defense presents in evidence a report from the chief of Einsatzkommando 3, SS Colonel Karl Jaeger. Dispatched to Berlin in December 1941, it listed the numbers of executions carried out by his squad since July of that year.
Have you gone through the figures in this report?
No, but I shall be happy to walk through them with you if you wish.
That will be easier. Of course, you will have time to check whether I'm right or not. Of 137,000 people executed, about 98.5% are identified as having been Jews. Men, women, and children.
That is correct, yes.
And this report goes back to Berlin?
Yes.
What happens to Herr Jaeger, the head of this Einsatzgruppen squad? Was he sacked?
That I do not know.
Imprisoned?
That I do not know.
This is completely at random, really, because one can take any number of examples. The massacre of 33,000 Jews from Kiev in one go in 2 days, 29th, 30th of September, 1941, at Babi Yar.
I do not know in detail about it.
Do not these things jump out at you, Mr. Irving? These vast numbers of recorded deaths is being shipped back, laboriously and carefully typewritten reports by the murderers to the head of the security service.
I accept that. But this is of great interest to a Holocaust historian, not a Hitler historian. I am a Hitler historian, if you appreciate the difference.
I do not think there is a difference.
We're not so much concerned with Hitler at the moment, but Berlin. Berlin must have known that the shootings were continuing on, as you would accept, a massive scale.
I accept this, my lord, yes.
Do I now have a clear concession that what the SS did in the East to the Russian Jews and the Baltic Jews, to a total of perhaps 1.5 million, was done on the authority and with the knowledge of Berlin?
Yes, quite clearly.
In October 1941, the first deportations of German Jews to the East took place. Although the Nazis were murdering thousands of Soviet Jews, it was not yet a matter of policy to kill Jews from their own country. With America, which was seen by Hitler as a Jewish-controlled nation, still not in the war, the Nazis had a powerful reason to preserve the German Jews.
Hitler had a specific interest in the Jews from Germany because he wanted to keep them as hostages, to keep America out of the war. and because there was a certain amount of unease amongst the killers and the SS and their aides in the East when it came to killing Jews from their own cultural circle. Killing East European Jews is one thing, Bolshevik Jews, as they understood them to be, or religiously orthodox Jews who they despised. That they did without any qualms. But Jews who spoke German, who came from Berlin, that caused a certain amount of unease, and Hitler didn't want to unsettle his men at the front line.
Irving attempts to show that the temporary exemption of German Jews from the massacres in the East is evidence against the systematic genocide of Jews across Europe. Irving insists that he is justified in drawing attention to facts which appear to contradict generally accepted views of the Holocaust. He focuses on one transport of 944 German Jews, which, according to British intelligence intercepts, was dispatched from Berlin to Lithuania on a regular passenger train, carrying food and water sufficient for 3 weeks.
The image we have from the literature is of coal trucks and cattle trucks being filled. I'm not saying this did not happen, but what I am saying is that the image we have is that all that happened was these wretched victims were stuffed into trains with no food and water and shipped across Europe to their deaths, when this, and the subsequent telegram which the British intercepted, indicates very substantial quantities of food were put aboard the trains for the short journey. And in the second telegram, you will remember, it also stated the fact they were carrying their appliances, food and appliances. So obviously, the people were sending them, at least the system that was sending them, apprehended that they were going to be doing something when they got there. I am speculating, I do emphasize. I'm just trying to give an explanation which might have escaped your attention.
No, it had not. You see, Mr. Irving, I'm concerned not with what actually happened, but with your readiness to jump to conclusions in favor of the SS and the Nazis on every single occasion.
I strongly object to that aspersion.
That is exactly what you have done here.
I strongly object. Here is a telegram that has not been quoted by any of your experts, because, of course, it does not fit into the perception they're trying to create, which presents a subtly different image of how that deportation program, brutal and cruel though it was, initially was started by the system.
Look at page 5 of the Jaeger report, line 3, November 25th, 1941, Kovno. They kill, execute 2,934 Jews, Jewesses, and Jewish children.
That is correct, yes.
In brackets, underneath it says, evacuees from Berlin, Munich, Frankfurt.
Yes.
Do you agree that it is likely that this is where your trainload of 944 well-provisioned Jews ended up?
I would not say it is impossible. The system ended when the train arrived. The system put the Jews and other victims on the trains and sent them east with the equipment and food to start a new life. Once they arrived on the spot, the system broke down and the murderers stepped in.
A mansion near a lake south of Berlin is accepted by most historians to be the place where the organization of the final solution was planned.
It's a very moody, atmospheric sort of place. Something has seeped into the soil or into the brickwork there. It's quite easy to imagine this conference in the winter with the big black Mercedes waiting outside and the chauffeurs waiting and the civil servants and the uniformed Gestapo and SS men coming out, having had lunch, I believe. And you could see then the way in which a modern European sophisticated state could descend into this kind of Al Capone style gangsterism. It's a very haunting place. The significance of the Wannsee Conference was really, that was the point at which everyone was painted with the same brush. They all dipped their hands in the blood.
On January the 20th, 1942, Reinhard Heydrich, chief of the Nazi Security Service, summoned a meeting of 15 Nazi functionaries, including Adolf Eichmann, to gather here. The entry of America into the war in December 1941 meant that the bureaucrats were gathering to discuss how best to fulfill Hitler's prophecy of the extermination of all 11 million Jews in Europe.
I think Wannsee was a conference which came at a point where Himmler and the racist apparatus had already begun a program of what one might call the rationalization of racism. I think that Himmler and others were shocked in the end by the brutality and violence of the wild killings across the summer, and were keen to bring the whole thing under control. It was very much Himmler's habit, of course. He liked order. He liked to have rational structures for carrying things out. He was very keen to do things the German way. So building up factories of death, extermination camps, liquidating Jews systematically, using bureaucrats as much as soldiers, I think was very much Himmler's way. And I see the Wannsee Conference, in a sense, as an attempt to announce that the program had now been brought under control. It was now going to be carried out along rational national socialist lines, and not along the lines of a war of destruction in the East, which is the way it had been conducted since June.
Irving disputes what happened at Wannsee. The transcript of the meeting, he insists, contains no reference to liquidation or to Hitler's approval. It was, he says, a low-level conference concerned with a shift in Nazi policy towards the Jews from deportation overseas to evacuation to the east.
Jetzt Wannsee.
But as one of the principal architects of the final solution, Adolf Eichmann confirmed at his trial in 1961, the talk at Wannsee had all been of killing and liquidation, disguised in the minutes, written by Eichmann himself, but checked over and amended by Heydrich.
Also vielleicht entsinnen Sie sich, was man da gesprochen hat.
Da sind die verschiedenen Tötungsmöglichkeiten besprochen
Verschiedene
worden.
Tötungsmöglichkeiten.
Jawohl.
Moreover, Eichmann said, the Wannsee Conference was in fact a high-level meeting of a wide range of senior officials to plan the implementation of the final solution of the Jewish question in Europe.
Im Einzelnen ist mir diese Sache heute nicht mehr gegenwärtig, Herr Präsident, aber ich weiß, dass die Herren beisammengesessen sind und haben hier eben in sehr unverblümten Worten, nicht in den Worten, wie ich sie dann ins Protokoll geben musste, sondern in sehr unverblümten Worten die Sache genannt, wie sie eben, ohne sie zu umschreiben.
Now America was in the war, there was no point keeping the Jews on ice, threatening to murder them. On the contrary, now is a time to make his prophecy come true and to punish them for the globalization of the war. And some historians would say that is the decisive moment at which the murder of the Jews expands from Poland and Russia to become a Europe-wide project.
Early in 1942, the final solution of the Jewish question entered a new and more lethal phase with the introduction of a technology of mass slaughter.
Himmler visited Minsk and witnessed a mass execution and was very shocked. Allegedly, some brains spattered onto his coat, and he realized that this was imposing quite a burden on the people who were doing it. And he decided that attempts should be made to produce a killing process that was easier for those carrying it out.
Gassing technology had been developed as part of the Nazi program of euthanasia, directed against mentally and physically handicapped people and claiming 70,000 lives. Now it was to be used against the Jews. Mobile gas fans first appeared on the Eastern Front early in 1942. Carbon monoxide was pumped from the van's engines to suffocate the victims locked inside. Irving has previously conceded the existence of these gas vans, acknowledging an eyewitness account from the SS colonel responsible for Jewish affairs, Adolf Eichmann. But he continues to claim that they were used only on an experimental basis.
I am going to suggest, Mr. Irving, that you have made statements about the use of gas trucks which fly in the face of the available evidence. And I am going to do this with reference to some Nuremberg documents which must have been available since goodness knows when.
To say that something must have been available...
I am suggesting, Mr. Irving, that a man in your position does not enter the arena waving flags and blowing trumpets unless he has taken the trouble to verify in advance what it is that he is trying to say, particularly when what he is saying is of great sensitivity and importance to millions of people throughout the world.
The defense enters into evidence an SS document of June 1942.
Since December 1941, for example, 97,000 were processed by 3 trucks in action without any defects in the vehicles being encountered.
Shall we go straight to the bottom line and say, yes, I fully accept the innuendo you're placing on that document?
Innuendo?
It is not stated clearly, but quite clearly, 97,000 people were liquidated in these trucks.
In 3 trucks.
Over the months concerned?
No, actually, it was just about a month and a week. 97,000 people in 3 trucks during the course of 5 weeks.
That is a very substantial achievement if you work it out with a pocket calculator.
Clever SS.
But is it very experimental?
My lord, I did not have this document at the time I said that. I had this document 5 or 6 months ago.
Answer the question, even so. Would you describe it as very limited and experimental?
Not on this scale. This is systematic.
It is systematic. Huge scale. Using gas trucks to murder Jews.
Yes, no question at all. But you have failed to establish the link upwards to Hitler.
So you keep asserting. I beg to differ, but I'm not going to develop that until the end of the case. So do you now accept that the statements that you made that they used gas trucks on a limited scale for experiments was just plain wrong?
Yes.
We got to 97,000 in a month.
Yes, which certainly seems an incredible figure when you only have 3 trucks and they can only take 20 at a time and they have to drive 20 miles out into the countryside. But I don't have the information to challenge the figure, apart from the inherent improbability of that figure.
It is a massive figure.
You also have to remember that they are bragging and boasting about what they have achieved.
Yes, of course. There is always the danger that they are keen to please somebody. They must have believed, if they were exaggerating, that Himmler was avid for information, telling him vast numbers of Jews had been murdered.
Yes.
Right. But you say that it is not really credible that Hitler knew about that.
Is it not remarkable that we have documents of this quality for everything below Himmler, but not a single page above Himmler.
I do not imagine that Himmler, at that stage, could have even thought of acting independently of the Führer. As he himself said, his whole life had been, his whole program had been based on loyalty to the Führer. The idea that Himmler had an independent policy, I think, is absurd. There's no question in my mind that the policy came from Hitler.
I think the scale of the genocide, of course, is enormous, and it would be impossible for somebody like Hitler, who was Supreme Commander, and a very active Supreme Commander, I mean, who looked at maps, who read railway schedules, who was interested in the minutiae of conducting war, quite impossible for this huge transportation effort, this huge security effort, to have been carried out without Hitler's knowledge.
I think only the most amateurish of researchers could believe that in a political setup like the Third Reich, every action that took place was authorized from above by a written order. This was a criminal regime that was aware it was engaging in criminal acts. It played fast and loose with the law. And there are a series of other orders given by Hitler that we know about, which were never actually put on paper. These were known as Führer wishes. His underlings would turn up at a place and say, it is the will of the Führer that something should happen. And everybody knew exactly what that meant. There was an order from on high. It was not to be written down. What we would call today complete deniability was to be preserved.
There are no orders. They have not been found. We've been in the archives, in and out of the archives of the world for the last 50 years, since the end of World War II. 55 years, and no primary, secondary, or tertiary evidence has been found as regards the war years.
The case is not that there is a piece of paper from Himmler to Hitler saying, here, Adolf, are the statistics. The case is simply this. The scale of the operation is vast. It must have involved what must have been very considerable disruption to military operations, amongst other things. It involved a lot of economic and manpower resources. It certainly goes all the way up to Heydrich and Wolf, who was Himmler's adjutant, seconded as liaison officer for some time at least to Hitler. In the light of what we do know that Hitler did know, in the light of all the information we have about Hitler's anti-Semitism, and as one of the foundations of Nazi ideology, it would be amazing if Hitler did not know, in broad terms. I'm not saying he was interested in numbers or anything like that. What was going on?
It's extremely helpful to have you put it clearly in that way. Thank you very much. May I suggest we just invite Mr. Irving to comment on that, if he wants to. He is entitled to have his say.
The proposition that the Learned Counsel has put is entirely acceptable. It's absolutely monstrous to assume that Adolf Hitler would not have known, and I have said precisely the same, my lord. In my books, I've written that after October 1943, which is the kind of watershed time I put, he had no excuse for not knowing. This is as far as I go. This is not the smoking gun. But he had no excuse for not having known.
But what about the period with which Mr. Rampton has been dealing this afternoon, between November-December 1941 and October 1943?
We are very ill-advised by the documents that are available even now, but in any case of ambiguity, then the balance of doubt has to go to the accused rather than the incriminated.
So it comes to this, does it, Mr. Irving? If you were sitting on a jury in a criminal court, whereas I might very easily convict Hitler, you would not.
No. You talk about in a criminal court. And of course, in a criminal court, the standards of evidence required, particularly when a man's life is at stake, are much sterner than in a civil action.
The European-wide genocide against the Jews reaches its climax in 1942. The ghettos of Poland are systematically emptied out. The great centres of population, Lublin, Lodz, Warsaw. It's also during this year that the roundups begin in France, the Netherlands, Belgium. All over Europe during 1942, Jews are being counted, listed, marked with the yellow star, rounded up, then loaded on trains and sent eastwards, most of them murdered on arrival.
In the summer of 1942, the ultimate stage of the final solution began to unfold. The use of hydrogen cyanide, Cyclone B, in the gas chambers of the Polish extermination centers. Some camps, like Auschwitz, were large complexes, part slave labor camp. Others, like Treblinka, Sobibor, and Belzec, were designed purely as factories of death. But whatever their destination, Jews who were sent to the camps were not expected to survive.
My next exercise is to show the scale of the operation, and in due course, and I give you fair warning, to demonstrate that anybody who supposes that those hundreds and thousands of Jews were sent to these tiny little villages, what should we say, in order to restore their health, is either mad or a liar.
Mr. Rampton, can I just draw one parallel and say that during World War II, large numbers of people were sent to Aldershot, which is also a tiny village. But I don't think anybody is alleging there were gas chambers at Aldershot.
I'm wondering what your position is, you see, Mr. Irving, because if it is simply this, I accept that the Germans systematically murdered Jews in vast numbers throughout 1941, accelerating through 1942, 1943, and reaching crescendo in 1944, but I do not accept that they used gas chambers, then I'm not bothered. Because the fact is, it is a systematic genocide. If, for example, the custodian of the museum at Auschwitz now proposes a figure of 1.2 million Jews murdered in that camp, I want to know whether you would accept that figure.
No. I have good reason not
Then
to.
I think we are back to where we are. Alas, I thought I saw a chink of daylight, but it is not there.